The boy hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not a single word, not a whisper, not even a scream when nightmares jerked him awake in the middle of the night. 7 years old, and Marco Santoro lived in a silence that no doctor could explain and no amount of money could fix. His father, Dominic Santoro, ruled Chicago's underground with calculated violence and unwavering control. Politicians answered his calls. Police looked the other way. Rival families knew better than to test his patience. But all that power meant nothing when it came to his son's voice, stolen 3 years ago on the night his mother died. Dominic had watched his wife, Sophia, take her last breath in their bedroom, a brain aneurysm that struck without warning. One moment she was laughing, playing piano for Marco in the music room. The next, she collapsed. Marco had been standing right beside her when it happened, his small hand reaching for hers as she fell. The boy screamed then, a sound so raw and terrified that the guards outside came running. But after that night, after they buried Sophia in the family plot with half the city in attendance, Marco never made another sound. Specialists flew in from around the world. Neurologists, psychiatrists, speech therapists, trauma experts. Every examination came back the same. Physically, Marco was perfect. His vocal cords functioned normally. His hearing was acute. His brain showed no damage. The silence was psychological, they said. Selective mutism triggered by trauma. Give it time. 3 years was a long time. Dominic threw himself into work, expanding his territory, eliminating threats, building an empire that would secure Marco's future, even if his son never spoke again. But late at night, he would stand outside Marco's bedroom door and listen to the silence, remembering when that room had been filled with a child's laughter. The mansion reflected Dominic's dual existence. Public areas designed to impress and intimidate, marble floors, vaulted ceilings, original artwork worth millions. But Marco's wing was different. Soundproofed walls, soft lighting, a music room that remained locked, untouched since Sophia's death, her grand piano gathering dust beneath a heavy cover. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marco attended private tutoring sessions in the mansion. No schools, no other children, no situations where his silence might invite questions or cruelty. His tutor, Mr. Chun, was patient and kind, teaching through written exercises and gentle encouragement. But even Mr. Chun admitted that Marco's development was suffering. A child needs to communicate, to express emotions, to connect with the world through language. Dominic hired every type of therapist imaginable. Play therapy, art therapy, animal therapy, though Marco showed no interest in the puppies and kittens brought to engage him. He would watch them with those dark, intelligent eyes, but his face remained expressionless, his lips pressed together as if speaking would shatter something fundamental inside him. The household staff learned to interpret Marco's gestures and expressions. A slight nod for yes, a shake of the head for no, pointing when he needed something. But these weren't communication. They were survival tactics. Marco had built a fortress of silence around himself, and no one could find the key to unlock it. Dominic's mother, Nana Rosa, moved into the mansion 6 months after Sophia's death. She was the only person Marco seemed to respond to with any warmth. The old woman would sit with him for hours, telling stories in Italian, her weathered hands holding his small ones. She never demanded words from him, never pushed or prodded. She simply existed beside him, offering unconditional presence. "He will speak when he is ready," she told Dominic one evening over dinner. You cannot force a heart to heal on your schedule. But Dominic wasn't a patient man. He'd built his empire through decisive action and relentless pressure. Waiting felt like weakness. Every day of Marco's silence was a reminder of everything Dominic had failed to protect. His wife, his son's childhood, the simple joy of hearing, "I love you, Papa." Business continued. Deals were made. Territory disputes were settled with violence when necessary. Dominic compartmentalized ruthlessly, becoming the cold enforcer during working hours, then transforming into a helpless father when he returned home to Marco's silent world. The contradiction was wearing him down. On a cold October evening, Dominic's life intersected with someone who would change everything. Her name was Aria Morelli, and she was 26 years old, broke, desperate, and more talented than she had any right to be given how cruelly life had treated her. Aria sat on a wooden crate outside Millennium Park, her battered keyboard propped on a makeshift stand, a coffee can at her feet collecting coins from passers-by. The instrument was ancient, missing 3 keys, but her fingers coaxed beauty from its limitations. She played classical pieces, mostly Chopin, Debussy, Beethoven, music that reminded people of culture and refinement even as they rushed past in their expensive coats. She'd been playing on Chicago streets for 8 months, ever since the restaurant where she'd worked as a pianist closed unexpectedly, leaving her without income and her grandmother without the medication that kept her heart functioning. The tips were unpredictable. Good days brought $40. Bad days, barely enough for bus fare home. Aria's apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where gunshots punctuated the night. She shared the cramped space with her grandmother, Nana Elena, the woman who had raised her after Aria's parents died in a car accident when she was 9. The same woman who had scraped together money for piano lessons, believing that music could save a grieving child. Music had saved Aria. It became her language, her therapy, her refuge. She'd attended a prestigious conservatory on scholarship, graduating with honors and dreams of performing in concert halls around the world. But life had other plans. Nana Elena's heart condition worsened. Medical bills consumed every penny, and Aria found herself playing Clair de Lune for loose change while her dreams dissolved like morning fog. That October evening, she'd been playing for 3 hours, her fingers numb from cold, her tipkin containing exactly $17.34. Not enough for tonight's medication. Not even close. She transitioned into a new piece, letting muscle memory guide her fingers while her mind calculated how to stretch $17 across impossible needs. The music flowed through her, bittersweet and haunting, a melody about loss and longing that seemed to match the autumn air. She didn't notice the black SUV that pulled to the curb 30 feet away. Didn't see the man in the expensive suit who stepped out, intending to walk past. Didn't realize that Dominic Santoro had stopped mid-stride, frozen by a sound he hadn't heard in 3 years. Dominic stood perfectly still, his security detail exchanging confused glances. Their boss never stopped for street performers. He barely acknowledged their existence. But something about this music had struck him like a physical blow. It was Sophia's song, the piece she'd been playing the night she died. Clair de Lune, the melody Marco had heard as his mother collapsed, the last beautiful thing before his world shattered into silence. Dominic approached slowly, his trained eye taking in details. The girl was young, early 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her clothes were clean but worn, layers against the cold that spoke of someone who couldn't afford proper winter gear. Her face held a concentration that transcended the shabby surroundings, completely absorbed in the music flowing from her damaged keyboard. She was extraordinary. Not just technically skilled, but emotionally connected to every note. The kind of talent that should have been performing in symphony halls, not begging for coins on a street corner. The song ended. Aria looked up, startled to find a man standing directly in front of her, studying her with an intensity that made her instinctively lean back. He was tall, probably mid-30s, with dark hair graying slightly at the temples. His suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months. Everything about him screamed power and danger. "You play beautifully," Dominic said, his voice carefully neutral. "Thank you." Aria's fingers hovered over the keys, uncertain. Most people dropped money and walked away. This man looked like he wanted something, and in Aria's experience, when wealthy men stopped to talk to struggling women, it rarely ended well. "Where did you study?" The question surprised her. "Chicago Conservatory. Graduated 3 years ago. And now you're here." It wasn't quite a question. Aria's chin lifted slightly. Life doesn't always go according to plan. Dominic appreciated the spark of pride beneath her obvious poverty. She wasn't begging, wasn't making excuses. Just stating facts. How much would it take to hire you for a private performance? Every alarm in Aria's head started screaming. "I don't do that kind of private performance. I have a son." Dominic's expression shifted, revealing something vulnerable beneath the dangerous exterior. He hasn't spoken in 3 years. Not since his mother died. The last thing he heard her play was that song, Clair de Lune. Aria's defenses lowered slightly. Grief she understood. Loss was a language she spoke fluently. I'm sorry for your loss. I want to hire you to play for him. In my home. Properly compensated, of course. How much? The words came out before Arya could stop them. Desperation made her bold. $5,000 for one evening. If my son responds positively, I'll hire you full-time at $10,000 a week. Arya's vision actually blurred. $5,000 would cover 3 months of Nana Elena's medication. $10,000 a week was more money than she could comprehend. But nothing was ever that simple. Why would you pay that much for a pianist? Because you're not just a pianist. You're possibly the key to getting my son to speak again. Dominic pulled out a business card, placing it on top of her keyboard. Think about it. My driver will be here tomorrow at 7 in the evening. If you're interested, he'll take you to my home. If not, I'll understand. He walked away before Arya could respond, disappearing into the SUV that pulled away smoothly into traffic. Arya stared at the card in her shaking hands. Dominic Santoro. No company name, just a phone number embossed in elegant script. She should throw the card away. Everyone in Chicago knew the Santoro name, even if they pretended not to. Mafia. Dangerous. The kind of people smart girls avoided at all costs. But when Arya returned home that night and found Nana Elena struggling to breathe, her medication bottle empty, the decision made itself. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. If playing piano for a mobster's son could save her grandmother, then that's what she would do. The next evening, Arya stood on the corner outside Millennium Park at exactly 7, wearing her only decent dress, her good coat, and every ounce of courage she possessed. The black SUV appeared like clockwork, windows tinted dark, intimidating even while stationary. The driver was a mountain of a man with a face that suggested he'd seen and done terrible things. But his voice was surprisingly gentle when he opened the rear door. Miss Morelli, Mr. Santoro is expecting you. The drive took 40 minutes, leaving the city behind for suburbs that transformed into estates hidden behind high walls and iron gates. The Santoro mansion appeared at the end of a long driveway, 3 stories of stone and glass that probably housed more square footage than Arya's entire apartment building. Guards watched from strategic positions. Security cameras tracked their approach. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. Dominic met her at the entrance, now wearing casual slacks and a sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. The money was persuasive. No point pretending this was about anything noble. He appreciated her honesty. I'll show you to the music room. My son will join us shortly. The mansion's interior matched its exterior, expensive but not gaudy, powerful rather than ostentatious. But when Dominic opened the doors to the music room, Arya actually gasped. A concert grand piano dominated the space, a Steinway that probably cost more than most houses. The room itself was acoustically perfect, with floors and high ceilings designed to enhance rather than deaden sound. Sheet music covered a side table, everything from classical masters to contemporary pieces. My wife was a concert pianist, Dominic explained, seeing Arya's expression. She taught at the conservatory before Marco was born. This was her sanctuary. It's beautiful. Arya approached the piano reverently, her fingers aching to touch the keys. The room has been locked since she died. You're the first person I've allowed inside. Dominic's voice carried weight beyond the simple statement. My son's tutor says he sometimes stands outside the door, his hand on the wood, but he never tries to open it. Arya understood immediately. The boy wasn't avoiding the room. He was guarding it, protecting his mother's memory by keeping everything exactly as she'd left it. I'll be gentle, she promised. Footsteps approached from the hallway. Arya turned to see a small figure appear in the doorway, a dark-haired boy with eyes that seemed too old for his face. He stopped abruptly when he saw her, his entire body going rigid. Marco, Dominic said softly. This is Arya. She's a pianist, like your mama was. She's going to play for us tonight. The boy's gaze moved from Arya to the piano, then back again. Something flickered across his expression. Fear, longing, pain, all compressed into a single moment before his face went blank again. Arya knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with Marco. She didn't smile or try to touch him. She simply spoke honestly. I know this room probably feels sacred to you. Your mother's space. I promise I'll treat it with respect. Marco studied her for a long moment, then gave a barely perceptible nod. It wasn't permission exactly, but it wasn't refusal either. Aria settled onto the piano bench, her hands trembling slightly as they touched the keys. The instrument was perfectly maintained, tuned to concert pitch despite years of disuse. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and began to play. Not Clair de Lune. That would come later. Instead, she started with something gentler, a Chopin nocturne that spoke of nighttime peace and quiet beauty. The notes filled the room like water filling a vessel, soft and inevitable. She felt rather than saw Marco edge closer. Dominic had positioned himself against the far wall, watching his son with desperate hope carefully concealed. But Aria kept her focus on the music, pouring everything she had into each phrase. The nocturne ended. She transitioned smoothly into a Bach prelude, then a Beethoven sonata, building a bridge of sound between herself and the silent boy who now stood just a few feet from the piano, his small hands gripping the edge as if anchoring himself. 30 minutes passed. An hour. Aria's fingers moved from memory, her entire being focused on connecting with Marco through the only language that had ever made sense to her. Music didn't lie. It didn't manipulate. It simply existed, honest and pure, speaking directly to the parts of people too deep for words. She could feel Marco responding. His breathing changed, synchronizing with the rhythm of her playing. His shoulders relaxed fractionally. Most significantly, tears began sliding silently down his cheeks. The boy was grieving. Finally, after 3 years of locked-away pain, the music had opened a door. Aria made a decision. She began the opening measures of Clair de Lune, the melody that Marco associated with his mother's last moments. The sound that had been trapped in his memory, too painful to revisit, too precious to forget. Marco's breath caught. His small body went rigid again. But Aria didn't stop. She played through his tension, through his tears, through the fear and longing radiating from him. The piece built toward its achingly beautiful climax, notes cascading like moonlight on water, bittersweet and perfect. And then, as the final phrase resolved into silence, Marco spoke. One word, barely a whisper. But after 3 years of silence, it shattered the room like a gunshot. Mama! Dominic's knees buckled. He caught himself against the wall, his composed mask cracking completely as he watched his son's lips form that single, precious word. Aria remained frozen at the piano, afraid that any movement might break whatever spell had been cast. Marco stood with tears streaming down his face, his mouth working around sounds that had been trapped for so long. Mama, he said again, louder this time. Then his eyes found Dominic across the room. Papa! The word demolished every wall Dominic had built around his heart. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees and pulling Marco into his arms. The boy collapsed against his father's chest, and for the first time in 3 years, he cried with sound, great heaving sobs that purged years of locked-away pain. Aria slipped quietly from the bench, giving them privacy for this moment. But Dominic's voice stopped her at the door. Wait! He looked up from Marco's shaking shoulders, his own face wet with tears. Please! So Aria waited, standing in the doorway of a dead woman's music room, watching a Mafia boss hold his son and cry, and understanding that she had just changed the trajectory of both their lives in ways she couldn't begin to predict. The boy had spoken, and now there would be no going back. Marco cried for 20 minutes. Not silent tears, but loud, gasping sobs that shook his entire small body. Dominic held him through all of it, one hand cradling the back of his son's head, the other wrapped protectively around his shoulders. The man who ordered executions without flinching now trembled as he absorbed 3 years of his child's grief. Aria remained by the door, her back pressed against the frame, unsure if she should leave or stay. The moment felt too intimate for a stranger to witness, yet Dominic had asked her to wait. So she stood in respectful silence, her own eyes burning with tears she didn't let fall. Finally, Marco's sobs quieted to hiccups, then to shuddering breaths. He pulled back slightly from his father's embrace, wiping his wet face with the back of his hand. His eyes, red and swollen, found Aria across the room. You play like Mama, he said, his voice hoarse and uncertain, as if testing whether it would still work. Aria's heart clenched. Your Mama must have been very talented. She was the best. Marco's words came slowly, carefully, like someone relearning a forgotten language. She played every night before bed. Sometimes I would fall asleep on the bench next to her. Dominic's hand tightened on Marco's shoulder, his jaw working as he fought to maintain composure. You remember that? I remember everything. Marco looked up at his father, and something passed between them that made Aria's chest ache. I just couldn't. The words wouldn't come out. They were stuck inside. I know, Piccolino. I know. Dominic pressed a kiss to the top of Marco's head. But they're coming out now. That's what matters. Marco turned back to Aria, studying her with the intense, focused children sometimes possess. Will you play more? If you want me to, Aria said gently. I want you to play every day. Marco's declaration was simple, absolute. Like Mama used to. Dominic stood, lifting Marco effortlessly despite the boy's protests that he was too old to be carried. That's up to Miss Morelli, but I think we should let her rest for tonight. It's late, and she's played for over an hour. Aria glanced at her phone. 9:30. Nana Elena would be worried, but the medication crisis had been temporarily solved by the $5,000 Dominic had transferred to her account before she'd even arrived, payment regardless of the outcome, he'd explained through his driver. I should get home to my grandmother, Aria said. She'll be concerned. My driver will take you. Dominic set Marco down, keeping one hand on the boy's shoulder. But first, we should discuss the arrangement going forward. Papa, she has to come back, Marco said urgently, his newfound voice carrying a desperate edge. Every day. Promise she'll come back. Marco, that's not. Please. The word was so raw, so full of need, that both adults fell silent. Marco looked. Between them, his small face creased with worry that seemed far too mature for 7 years old. The music, it makes the quiet go away. The bad quiet that's been in my head since Mama died. Aria's professional distance crumbled completely. She knew exactly what Marco meant. She'd lived with that same suffocating quiet after her parents died, the kind of silence that felt like drowning in slow motion. Music had been her lifeline, too. I'll come back, she heard herself promise. As often as your father wants me to. Relief washed over Marco's face so completely that he actually smiled. A genuine expression that transformed him from a haunted child into someone who might still remember how to be happy. Dominic met Aria's eyes over Marco's head, and she saw gratitude there that went beyond words or money. Can you start tomorrow? Same time? Yes. Aria thought of her street corner, her coffee can of coins, the uncertainty of every day. This was better. Safer. More money than she dreamed possible. So why did accepting feel like stepping off a cliff? Because she was entering Dominic Santoro's world, and everyone knew that world was built on violence and secrets. But looking at Marco's hopeful expression, she couldn't bring herself to care about the danger. There are details we should discuss, Dominic said, his businessman persona sliding back into place now that Marco was calmer. Marco, why don't you go with Nana Rosa? I think she's made hot chocolate in the kitchen. Can Aria have some too? Marco asked, already moving toward the door but clearly reluctant to let her out of his sight. Miss Morelli needs to get home to her grandmother, Dominic said gently. But tomorrow, you can have hot chocolate together before her performance. How does that sound? Marco nodded, apparently satisfied with this compromise. He paused at the door, looking back at Aria one more time. Thank you for playing Mama's song. I thought I'd never hear it again without it hurting. Music should heal, not hurt, Aria said softly. Your mama knew that. After Marco disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps echoing on marble floors, Dominic's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerable father vanished, replaced by the calculating businessman who ruled Chicago's underworld. 10,000 a week, as I mentioned, he said, walking to a desk in the corner and withdrawing a leather-bound checkbook. You'll play for Marco 6 evenings a week, 2 hours per session. Sundays you'll have off unless specifically requested. Aria's mind reeled at the numbers. 40,000 a month. Nearly $500,000 a year. For playing piano. That's extremely generous. It's what bringing my son back is worth to me. Dominic wrote the check with swift, confident strokes. The first month in advance. Consider it a signing bonus and insurance that you won't disappear. He handed her a check for $40,000. Aria stared at it, her hand shaking. This single piece of paper represented more security than she'd known in 5 years. Nana Elena's medication. Rent paid 6 months in advance. Maybe even a better apartment in a safer neighborhood. There are conditions, Dominic continued, his voice dropping into something harder. You don't discuss my family or this arrangement with anyone. What happens in this house stays in this house. You arrive at 7, perform for Marco, and leave by 10. My driver will provide transportation both ways. You don't interact with my business associates if they're present. You don't ask questions about my work. And most importantly, you don't disappoint my son. The last condition carried weight that made Aria's skin prickle. This wasn't a threat exactly, but it wasn't not a threat either. Dominic Santoro was making it clear that Marco's well-being was paramount, and anyone who harmed that well-being would face consequences. I understand, Aria said, folding the check carefully and tucking it into her purse. I'm here for Marco. Nothing else. Good. Dominic's expression softened slightly. My son has been through hell. You've given him something I couldn't, a reason to speak again, a way to process his grief. I won't forget that. He did the hard part, Aria said. I just played piano. You did more than that. Dominic walked her toward the door, his hand not quite touching her elbow, but guiding her nonetheless. You understood what he needed. Most people would have tried to force conversation or push too hard. You let the music speak for both of you. They walked through the mansion's corridors, past rooms that probably cost more to furnish than most people earned in a lifetime. Guards nodded respectfully as Dominic passed, their eyes sliding over Aria with professional assessment before dismissing her as non-threatening. The driver was waiting by the SUV, engine running, ready to transport Aria back to her reality. But before she could climb into the vehicle, Dominic spoke again. My mother will want to meet you tomorrow. Nana Rosa. She's been Marco's anchor these past 3 years. She'll need to approve of anyone spending significant time with him. Of course. Aria understood family hierarchy, even in criminal organizations. Maybe especially in criminal organizations. One more thing. Dominic's voice dropped low enough that only Aria could hear. You're going to hear things about me. Probably already have. Some of them are true. Some are exaggerated. But understand this. Everything I do, every choice I make, is to protect my family. Marco is my world. If you're good to him, you'll be protected too. If you betray that trust. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I would never hurt a child, Aria said firmly. I know what it's like to lose everything. I wouldn't inflict that pain on anyone, especially someone as vulnerable as Marco. Dominic studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. Get home safely, Miss Morelli. Tomorrow at 7. The drive back to her neighborhood felt surreal. Aria sat in the leather seats of a vehicle that probably cost more than she'd earned in 5 years, even with her new salary, watching the city transform from wealthy suburbs back to struggling urban sprawl. The check in her purse felt heavy, almost dangerous, like carrying a winning lottery ticket through a bad neighborhood. Her apartment building looked even more decrepit than usual when the SUV pulled up outside. Graffiti covered the ground floor walls. 2 of the 3 streetlights were broken. A group of teenagers on the corner eyed the expensive vehicle with open speculation. The driver insisted on walking her to her door, his massive presence clearing a path through the building's dimly lit hallway. He didn't comment on the peeling paint or the smell of mildew and old cooking oil. Just ensured she was safely inside before nodding once and disappearing back down the stairs. Aria locked 3 deadbolts behind her, then leaned against the door, finally allowing herself to process everything that had happened. Piccola! Nana Elena's voice called from the bedroom. Is that you? Yes, Nana. Aria kicked off her shoes and went to check on her grandmother. The old woman was propped up on pillows, her breathing labored but steady. The medication Aria had purchased that afternoon with Dominic's advance sat on the nightstand, proof that at least one crisis had been solved. You're back late, Nana Elena observed, her sharp eyes missing nothing despite her failing body. This new job? Yes. Aria sat on the edge of the bed, taking her grandmother's papery hand. Playing piano for a little boy. Private performances. The family is wealthy. Very. Dangerous wealthy, or legitimate wealthy. Nana Elena had lived in Chicago her entire life. She understood the distinction. Arya hesitated, then decided on honesty. Dangerous. But the boy. Nana, he hadn't spoken in 3 years. Tonight he spoke. Because of music. Because of something I could do. The old woman studied her granddaughter's face, reading emotions Arya didn't speak aloud. You feel responsible for him now. He's 7 years old, and he's been carrying grief that would break most adults. If I can help him. Arya's voice trailed off. Then you will help him, regardless of the danger. Nana Elena patted Arya's hand. You have your mother's heart. She would do the same. But Piccola, be careful. Men who live by violence don't suddenly become gentle just because they love their children. I know. Arya thought of Dominic's cold warning, the implicit threat beneath his gratitude. But the money. Nana, it's enough to cover everything. Your medication, better doctors, maybe even the surgery Dr. Patel mentioned. Money from blood is still blood money. Money is money when you're drowning in medical debt. Arya's pragmatism warred with her grandmother's old-world morality. I'm just playing piano, Nana. That's all. I'm not involved in anything illegal. You're entering their world. That's involvement enough. But Nana Elena's expression softened. Still, I won't pretend the money isn't a blessing. And if this boy needs you. She trailed off, coughing weakly. Arya helped her grandmother take her evening medication, then prepared the nebulizer that eased her breathing. As the machine hummed in the quiet apartment, Arya found herself thinking about another child struggling to breathe, emotionally, psychologically, drowning in silence. Marco had found his voice tonight, but Arya sensed that speaking was just the first step in a much longer healing process. The boy had been locked away inside himself for 3 years. Opening that door would release not just words, but all the pain and trauma he'd been suppressing. She wondered if Dominic understood that. If he was prepared for what might come now that Marco could express everything he'd been holding inside. That night, Arya lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling and thinking about the choice she'd made. She'd accepted money from a man whose hands were almost certainly stained with blood. She'd agreed to enter a world where violence was currency and loyalty was enforced through fear. But when she closed her eyes, she didn't see Dominic's cold authority or the mansion's fortress-like security. She saw Marco's face when he'd spoken his mother's name, the desperate hope in his eyes, the way he'd smiled when Arya promised to return. Some things were worth the risk. The next evening, Dominic's driver arrived precisely at 6:30, giving Arya time to prepare before the 7 o'clock session. She dressed carefully, professional but not provocative, expensive enough to fit into the mansion's environment, but not so costly that it seemed like she was spending the money she'd just been paid. The drive was familiar now, though no less surreal. Arya used the time to mentally prepare her playlist for the evening. More Chopin, some Rachmaninoff, maybe Liszt if Marco seemed ready for something more dramatic. She'd avoid Debussy for now. Clair de Lune had been powerful because it was unexpected, but she didn't want to drain its impact by overuse. The mansion looked different in evening light, less fortress-like, almost beautiful in the way expensive things become when backlit by a setting sun. Guards still watched from their positions, but one nodded at Arya as the SUV passed, a small acknowledgement that she was expected, approved, no longer an unknown variable. Dominic met her in the foyer, looking tired despite his expensive clothes and carefully maintained appearance. Marco's been asking about you every hour since he woke up this morning. I couldn't get him to concentrate on lessons. He just kept staring at the music room door. Is he anxious? Arya asked, concerned that she created a dependence that might be unhealthy. Excited. Dominic's expression softened. He hasn't been excited about anything in 3 years. This morning he asked me what his mother's favorite foods were, what colors she liked, stories about when they used to play together. He's remembering her now, really remembering, not just carrying the weight of her death. Arya felt relief wash through her. This was good, healthy. That's what music does sometimes. It unlocks things we've kept buried. Nana Rosa is in the sitting room, Dominic said, gesturing down a hallway. She'd like to speak with you before tonight's session. The sitting room was smaller than Arya expected, cozier, filled with family photographs and comfortable furniture that looked actually used rather than decoratively placed. An elderly woman sat in a high-backed chair near the fireplace, her silver hair pulled into an elegant bun, her dark eyes sharp despite the wrinkles around them. "Miss Morelli," Nonna Rosa said, her accent thick with Italian inflections. "Come sit. Let me look at you properly." Aria sat on the sofa across from the old woman, submitting to a scrutiny that felt more thorough than any job interview she'd ever experienced. Nonna Rosa studied her face, her hands, even the way she held herself, reading some narrative that Aria couldn't decipher. "You're younger than I expected," Nonna Rosa finally said. "And you have grief in your eyes. Old grief, the kind that doesn't fade but becomes part of who you are." "My parents died when I was 9, Aria admitted. "My grandmother raised me. And now she is dying." Aria's breath caught. "How did you—" "I see it in your face. The fear. The exhaustion. The way you hold your shoulders like you're carrying something too heavy." Nonna Rosa's expression gentled. "You take money from my son to save someone you love. This makes you desperate, and desperate people are sometimes dangerous." "I would never hurt Marco," Aria said firmly. "No, I don't believe you would. But you might hurt him without meaning to, simply by being someone he attaches to who then disappears when your grandmother passes or when you no longer need the money." Nonna Rosa leaned forward. "Slightly. My grandson has lost his mother. He cannot lose another person he cares about. Do you understand?" Aria understood completely. She was being warned that walking away from Marco once she'd entered his life would have consequences. Not just from Dominic, but from this woman who loved her grandson fiercely enough to threaten a stranger. "I understand," Aria said. "And I promise you, as long as Marco needs me and your son wants me here, I won't disappear. Not for any reason." "Good." Nonna Rosa settled back in her chair. "Now, tell me about your grandmother. What is her condition?" The question surprised Aria, but she answered honestly. "Congestive heart failure. Stage 3. She needs medication to manage it, but eventually she'll need surgery to have any real quality of life. The surgery is expensive, even with insurance." "How expensive?" $75,000 after insurance covers their portion. Nonna Rosa was quiet for a moment, then called out in Italian. Dominic appeared in the doorway almost immediately, suggesting he'd been nearby the entire time. A rapid conversation in Italian followed, too fast for Aria to follow with her limited understanding of the language. She caught words here and there: surgery, family, obligation, but the overall meaning eluded her. Finally, Nonna Rosa switched back to English. "Dominic will arrange for your grandmother to see Dr. Castellano at Northwestern Memorial. He is the best cardiac surgeon in the city, and he owes our family favors. The surgery will be covered in full." Aria felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath her. I can't accept that. It's too much." "You can and you will," Dominic said firmly. "Consider it part of your employment package. My son needs you healthy and focused, not distracted by worry about your grandmother's condition." "But—" "No arguments." Nonna Rosa's tone left no room for negotiation. "Family takes care of family. You are helping my grandson. That makes you family." Aria's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. These people, these dangerous, powerful people, were offering her the exact miracle she'd been praying for. The catch was that accepting tied her even more firmly to their world, made her complicit in whatever darkness funded their generosity. But Nonna Elena would live. That was worth any price. "Thank you," Aria whispered. "You don't know what this means." "I know exactly what it means," Nonna Rosa said softly. "It means you will never be able to walk away without guilt. It means you are bound to us now, for better or worse. But Piccola, understand this, we protect our own. You are ours now, whether you plan to be or not." The words should have terrified Aria. Instead, she felt something like relief settle over her shoulders. She'd been alone and struggling for so long that the idea of belonging somewhere, even somewhere dangerous, felt like coming home. "Can I see Marco now?" she asked. Dominic smiled, the expression transforming his face into something almost gentle. "He's been waiting by the music room door for 20 minutes. I think he's afraid you won't show up." Aria followed Dominic through the mansion's hallways, her heart pounding with anticipation. When they reached the music room, Marco was indeed standing outside, his small hand resting on the doorknob, frozen in uncertainty. "She's here, Piccolino," Dominic said softly. Marco spun around, his face lighting up with relief so profound it made Aria's chest ache. "You came back." "I promised I would," Aria said, kneeling to his level. "And I keep my promises. Nana Rosa says you're family now." Marco studied her face seriously. "Is that true?" Aria glanced at Dominic, who nodded slightly. "Yes, I guess it is." "Good." Marco's smile was shy but genuine. "I like having family. Can we play music now?" "Absolutely." Aria stood, holding out her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Marco took it, his small fingers warm in hers. They entered the music room together, and Aria settled onto the bench. But before she could begin playing, Marco climbed up beside her, exactly as he'd apparently done with his mother years ago. "Is this okay?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. "Mama used to let me sit here." "It's perfect," Aria assured him. And as her fingers found the keys and music began to fill the room, she felt Marco relax against her side. His head rested lightly against her shoulder, and she heard him humming softly along with the melody. Dominic watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. But when his eyes met Aria's, she saw gratitude there that went beyond words or money. She brought his son back from the brink of silence. Now she just had to make sure she didn't send him falling again. Because in Dominic Santoro's world, failure wasn't punished with termination of employment. It was punished with something far more permanent. The first week passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Aria arrived each evening at 7, played for Marco until 9, then returned home to care for Nana Elena. The money transformed their lives immediately. New medication that actually worked. A specialist appointment at Northwestern Memorial scheduled for the following month. Groceries that weren't chosen based solely on what was cheapest. But normalcy was an illusion in the Santoro household. On the 4th evening, Aria arrived to find the mansion's security heightened to an almost suffocating degree. Guards patrolled in pairs instead of alone. New cameras had been installed. Men with barely concealed weapons stood at strategic positions throughout the grounds. Dominic met her at the door, his expression harder than usual. "There's been a situation. Nothing that concerns you directly, but I need you to be more careful. My driver will pick you up from your apartment from now on. No more meeting him on the corner." "What kind of situation?" Aria asked before she could stop herself. "The kind you don't ask about." Dominic's tone was gentle but firm. "Marco's waiting for you. Try to keep things normal for him. He's picked up on the tension." The music room felt different that night. Marco was agitated, his small body vibrating with nervous energy. He couldn't sit still on the piano bench, kept jumping down to pace, his hands twisting together anxiously. "Marco, what's wrong?" Aria asked, abandoning her planned playlist. "Men were yelling this morning," Marco said, his voice tight. "In Papa's office. One of them said someone was dead, that it was a message." Aria's blood went cold. This was the reality of Dominic's world, the violence that funded her salary and her grandmother's surgery. But she couldn't let Marco see her fear. "Adults sometimes have conflicts," she said carefully. "But your papa handles those things. It's not something you need to worry about. Mama died because of Papa's work." Marco's words came out flat, factual. "That's what Uncle Sal said once. He didn't know I was listening, but I heard him. He said if Papa hadn't been who he was, Mama would still be alive." Aria's heart clenched. She had no idea if that was true or just the bitter words of someone in Dominic's organization. But Marco believed it, and that belief had clearly been poisoning him. "Your mama died from a medical condition," Aria said firmly. "An aneurysm. That has nothing to do with your father's business. But if we'd been different people in a different place, you can what if yourself to death, Marco." Aria took his small hands in hers. "Trust me, I've done it. After my parents died, I spent years thinking what if we'd taken a different route that day, or what if they'd left 5 minutes later. But the what-ifs don't change anything. They just make you feel guilty for things you couldn't control." Marco's eyes searched her face. "Do you still think about them?" "Every day. But now I think about the good things. The music my mama taught me. The way my papa used to dance in the kitchen. The love they gave me before they were gone." Aria squeezed his hands gently. "Your mama gave you music too. Every time you listen, every time we play together, she's here with us." Something in Marco's expression softened. Will you play the song from the first night? Mama's song. Claire de Lune. He nodded. Aria returned to the piano, and Marco climbed up beside her, his earlier agitation fading as the familiar melody filled the room. But this time, something different happened. Halfway through the piece, Marco began to hum along, his voice thin and uncertain at first, then growing stronger. By the final phrases, he was singing, wordless, pure sound that harmonized with the piano in a way that raised goosebumps on Aria's arms. The boy had his mother's musical gift. It was evident in every note. When the song ended, Marco was crying again, but these were different tears. Not the wrenching sobs of the first night, but quiet drops that spoke of release rather than pain. I can hear Mama in the music now, he whispered. Not just the sound she made, but her. Like she's trying to tell me something. What do you think she's trying to tell you? Marco was quiet for a long moment. That she's okay. That I can be okay too. Dominic stood in the doorway, and Aria wondered how long he'd been there. His face was carefully neutral, but his eyes were suspiciously bright. After Marco went to bed that night, Dominic asked Aria to join him in his study. The room was exactly what she'd expected: dark wood, leather furniture, expensive liquor, and an atmosphere of barely contained power. Marco told me what you said tonight, Dominic began, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses. About guilt and what-ifs. I probably overstepped, Aria said, accepting the glass he offered even though she rarely drank. No. Dominic settled into the chair across from her. You said exactly what he needed to hear. What I've been trying to say for 3 years, but couldn't find the right words. He took a long drink. His uncle was wrong, by the way. Sophia's death had nothing to do with my business. She was born with a weakness in her blood vessels. It could have happened at any time, anywhere. I believe you. Aria wasn't sure if she did, but Marco needed to believe it, and that was more important. The situation I mentioned earlier, Dominic continued, his voice dropping lower. A rival family has been pushing into my territory, testing boundaries. Tonight, they killed one of my men. Left him in public as a warning. Aria's hand tightened on her glass. Why are you telling me this? Because you're part of Marco's life now, which means you're part of mine. And I need you to understand that the next few weeks might be dangerous. Dominic's gaze was intense, almost hypnotic. I have enemies who wouldn't hesitate to use anyone I care about as leverage. That includes you now. Are you saying I should stop coming? I'm saying you need to be smart. Follow security protocols. Don't deviate from the schedule. And if you see anything unusual, anyone following you, anyone asking questions, you tell my driver immediately. This is because of the money you're paying me, isn't it? And the surgery for my grandmother. Aria set down her glass with a sharp click. You've made me a target just by associating with you. Yes. Dominic didn't apologize or justify. That's the reality of my world. Everyone I touch becomes a potential weapon against me. But you accepted the money knowing who I was. And more than that, you've made yourself essential to my son. Walking away now would destroy him. The trap had closed without Aria even realizing it. She was bound to this family by gratitude, by money, by Marco's desperate need for connection. And now by the simple fact that leaving would put her in as much danger as staying. What do I do? She asked quietly. You continue exactly as you have been. Play for Marco. Help him heal. And trust that I will protect what's mine. The possessiveness in Dominic's voice should have frightened her. Instead, it felt oddly reassuring. Okay. Aria stood, suddenly exhausted. I should get home. Nana Elena worries when I'm late. Wait! Dominic pulled something from his desk drawer. A small phone, sleek and expensive. Private line. Only 3 numbers programmed in. My cell. My driver. And Marco's room, in case of emergency. Keep it on you always. Aria took the phone, feeling its weight in her palm. Another tie binding her to the Santoro family. Another step deeper into a world she'd never planned to enter. The next 2 weeks brought changes both subtle and dramatic. Marco's vocabulary expanded daily as he made up for 3 years of silence. He talked constantly during their sessions, asking questions about music theory, about Aria's life, about anything and everything his curious mind seized upon. But he also had nightmares. Aria would arrive some evenings to find him exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, jumping at sudden sounds. The trauma he'd suppressed by staying silent was emerging now that he had words to express it. "I dream about Mama falling," he told Aria one evening, his voice small. "I dream that I catch her this time, but I'm never strong enough. She always slips through my fingers." Aria had started incorporating music therapy techniques she'd learned in college, using specific compositions to help Marco process his emotions. Angry, percussive pieces when he needed to release frustration. Soft, flowing melodies when he needed comfort. The music became a language more effective than words. Nana Elena's surgery was scheduled for early December. Dr. Castellano himself conducted the pre-operative consultation, his manner brisk but thorough. He never mentioned his connection to the Santoro family, treating Nana Elena with the same professional courtesy he'd show any patient. But after examining her, he pulled Aria aside. "Your grandmother's condition is more advanced than the previous doctor realized. The surgery is necessary, but the risks are significant. Age, weakened heart muscle, potential complications." He paused. "Dominic has asked me to give her the best possible care. I will. But you should prepare yourself for the possibility that she might not survive the operation." Aria felt the world tilt. What are the odds? 60-40 in favor of success. Those aren't bad odds, Miss Morelli. But they aren't certainties either. That night, Aria played with a desperation she'd never felt before. Her fingers flew across the keys, pouring every ounce of fear and grief into Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The dark, thunderous piece matched her emotional state perfectly, beautiful and terrible at once. Marco sat on the bench beside her, not humming this time, just listening with an intensity that suggested he understood exactly what she was feeling. When the final chords faded, he spoke softly. "You're scared." "Yes." No point in lying to a child who'd lived through his own devastating loss. "Is your Nana dying?" "She's very sick. She's having surgery soon, and there's a chance." Aria's voice broke. "There's a chance she won't make it." Marco was quiet for a moment, then slipped his small hand into hers. "I was with Mama when she died. 1 second she was laughing, and then she just stopped, like someone turned off a light." His fingers tightened. "I thought if I didn't talk about it, if I didn't say it out loud, maybe it wouldn't be real. Maybe she'd come back. But she didn't." "No." And being quiet didn't make the hurt less. It just made it bigger, trapped inside with nowhere to go. Marco looked up at her with eyes far too wise for 7 years old. "If your Nana dies, it's going to hurt. But talking about it, playing music about it, that helps. At least it's helping me now." Aria pulled Marco into a hug, this child who'd become so important to her in such a short time. "When did you get so smart? Nana Rosa says suffering makes you grow up fast." Marco's voice was muffled against her shoulder. "I don't think I like being grown up yet." "Nobody does," Aria whispered. "Nobody does." If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The breakthrough in Marco's healing came unexpectedly during the 3rd week. Aria arrived to find the music room filled with afternoon light, and Marco standing in front of his mother's piano with a determined expression. "I want to learn to play," he announced. "Not just listen. Play like Mama did. Like you do." Aria's heart swelled. "Are you sure? It takes a lot of practice and patience." "I'm sure." Marco climbed onto the bench, his small hands hovering over the keys. "Will you teach me?" Teaching Marco became part of their evening routine. His progress was remarkable. He had natural talent inherited from Sophia, combined with the kind of fierce determination that came from needing music as much as wanting it. But his lessons revealed something else. Marco had been paying attention all those years when Sophia played. His muscle memory retained information his conscious mind had stored away. His fingers knew where to go even when his brain didn't understand why. "It's like Mama's hands are guiding mine," he said during one session, his face illuminated with wonder. Dominic watched these lessons whenever he could, standing in the doorway with an expression that cycled between joy and grief. His son was healing, but every musical milestone was also a reminder of what Sophia should have been here to witness. One evening after Marco's lesson, Dominic asked Arya to stay later than usual. I have something to show you. He led her to a part of the mansion she'd never seen, the third floor, which was apparently his private domain. They entered a room that functioned as both library and office, lined with books and photographs that told the story of Dominic's life. This was Sophia's favorite room, he said, running his hand along a shelf of leather-bound classics. She said it was the only place in the house that felt like a home instead of a fortress. Arya studied the photographs on the walls. Sophia had been beautiful. Dark hair, warm eyes, a smile that suggested she'd found joy even in difficult circumstances. In every picture where she appeared with Dominic, his expression softened in a way Arya had never seen in person. You loved her very much, Arya said softly. She was the only person who ever saw past what I do to who I am. Dominic picked up a framed photo of Sophia at the piano, Marco sitting beside her, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. She knew exactly what kind of man she was marrying. Didn't flinch from it, didn't try to change me, just loved me anyway. Marco is lucky to have had her, even for a short time. He's lucky to have you now. Dominic set down the photo and turned to face Arya fully. I didn't bring you here just to reminisce. I wanted you to understand something. This family has a habit of making people part of it, whether they intend to be or not. Sophia didn't come from our world either. She was a conservatory professor, completely legitimate, no criminal connections. But she fell in love with me, and that changed everything. Are you warning me about something? Arya's pulse quickened. I'm preparing you. Dominic moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the intimate space. Because I've watched the way you look at Marco, the way you protect him, the way you've woven yourself into his life and mine. And I know what happens next. What happens next? Arya whispered. You become irreplaceable. Not just to Marco, but to me. And when that happens, the people who want to hurt me will see you as a target. His hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture surprisingly gentle. I can't let anything happen to you. Not because of what you do for Marco, but because... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he stepped back abruptly, as if realizing he'd crossed a line. Your grandmother's surgery is in 3 days. I've arranged for round-the-clock security at the hospital. No one will get near her without clearance. Arya's mind was reeling. The conversation had taken a turn she hadn't expected, revealing feelings she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Thank you for everything you've done for Nana Elena. Thank me by staying safe. Dominic's voice was rough, and by continuing to be exactly what Marco needs. The surgery day arrived wrapped in winter cold and gray skies. Arya sat in Northwestern Memorial's private waiting room, courtesy of Dr. Castellano's VIP patient status, watching clock hands move with agonizing slowness. Marco had wanted to come, but Dominic had gently explained that hospitals weren't places for children unless absolutely necessary. Instead, Marco had given Arya a drawing he'd made, a picture of Nana Elena surrounded by musical notes and hearts. For good luck, he'd said seriously. Mama used to say music has magic. Maybe the magic will help. Arya clutched that drawing now, her prayers wordless but desperate. Dominic's security was indeed present. 2 men in suits who looked like they belonged in an action movie rather than a hospital. But their presence was oddly comforting. At least if something went wrong, it wouldn't be because of outside threats. Dr. Castellano emerged after 6 hours of surgery, still in his scrubs, his face tired but satisfied. The surgery was successful. Your grandmother's heart is repaired, and she's stable in recovery. The next 48 hours are critical, but I'm optimistic. Arya's legs went weak with relief. Can I see her? Brief visits only. She's heavily sedated, won't be truly conscious for several more hours. Nana Elena looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped rhythmic reassurance. But her chest rose and fell steadily, and when Arya took her hand, she could feel the pulse beating strong and true. I got a second chance because of them. Nana, Arya whispered. Because of the Santoros. I know what you'd say about owing dangerous people. But I don't care. You're alive. That's all that matters. She stayed until visiting hours ended, then returned home to an apartment that felt hollow without Nana Elena's presence. The phone Dominic had given her buzzed with a text. Heard about the surgery. Marco wants to know if your grandmother will like the flowers he picked out. They'll be delivered to her room in the morning. Aria smiled through her tears, texting back. She'll love them. Thank him for me. He's waiting for you tomorrow. 7 p.m. as usual. I'll be there. The next evening, Aria arrived at the mansion to find Marco practically vibrating with excitement. I wrote a song, he announced. Well, Nana Rosa helped with the words, but the music is all mine. It's for your grandmother, so she knows she has to get better. What followed was possibly the sweetest, most off-key composition Aria had ever heard. Marco sang with complete sincerity about sunshine and flowers and people who love you waiting at home. His piano playing was still very basic, but his heart was fully in every note. When he finished, he looked at Aria hopefully. Do you think she'll like it? She'll love it. Aria wiped her eyes, not caring that she was crying in front of him. Can we record it? I want to play it for her when she's awake enough to hear. They spent the next hour perfecting Marco's song, recording it on Aria's phone. Marco insisted on multiple takes, wanting it to be perfect. His dedication reminded Aria so much of Sophia's photographs, the same intense focus, the same need to get the music exactly right. Dominic appeared during the final recording, listening from the doorway with an expression Aria couldn't quite read. After Marco went to get water, Dominic approached the piano. He's never written anything before, he said quietly. Never even attempted to. But for you, for your grandmother. He trailed off. You've given him more than his voice back, Aria. You've given him purpose. He's a special kid. He would have found his way eventually. Maybe, but you helped him get there faster. Dominic's hand found hers on the piano keys. I meant what I said the other night. About you becoming irreplaceable. Aria's breath caught. Dominic, I know the timing is terrible. I know you have enough to worry about with your grandmother. But I need you to understand that what's happening between us, it's not just about Marco anymore. We can't, Aria said, even as her fingers tightened around his. Your world, my world, they don't mix. Sophia said the same thing when we first met. 2 years later, she was my wife. Dominic's thumb traced patterns on her palm. I'm not asking you for anything right now. I'm just telling you what's true. You're in my head, in my life, and I don't want you to leave. Before Aria could respond, Marco's voice called from the hallway. Dominic released her hand immediately, stepping back to a professional distance. But the moment hung between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. The next few days passed in a blur of hospital visits and evening sessions with Marco. Nana Elena improved steadily, her strength returning as her repaired heart pumped more efficiently. She was lucid enough now to hear Marco's recorded song, and her tears of joy made everything, the risk, the compromise, the moral ambiguity, worth it. This family, Nana Elena said during one visit, her voice still weak but gaining strength. They're dangerous, Piccola, but they've saved my life. What does that make us? Grateful, Aria said simply. And maybe a little bit theirs. More than a little bit, I think. Nana Elena squeezed her granddaughter's hand. The boy's father, he looks at you a certain way. Nana, I may be old and sick, but I'm not blind. He's claimed you in his mind, whether you've accepted it or not. The old woman's expression grew serious. Be careful, Aria. Men like him, they don't love gently. They possess. They protect. They destroy anything that threatens what's theirs. I know. Aria had seen glimpses of that darkness in Dominic, the cold calculation, the casual way he discussed violence, the absolute certainty that his will would be done. But you're falling for him anyway. Aria couldn't deny it. Somewhere between Marco's music lessons and late-night conversations in Dominic's study, between the security details and the extravagant gifts, she'd started seeing the man beneath the monster. And worse, she'd started caring. It's not smart, she admitted. Love rarely is. Nana Elena smiled weakly. Just promise me you'll keep your eyes open. Don't let the money or the protection, or the way they make you feel like family blind you to what they really are. I promise, Nana. But keeping that promise was harder than Aria expected, because the Santoro family had a way of making their world seem normal, even natural. The guards became familiar faces. The security protocols became routine. The occasional tension, when Dominic dealt with business problems, became just another part of daily life. And Marco was thriving in ways that made Aria's heart sing. He laughed now, real belly laughs that echoed through the mansion. He asked questions constantly, his curious mind finally free to engage with the world. He played piano daily, his skills improving with a speed that suggested genuine prodigy-level talent. 2 weeks after Nana Elena's surgery, Marco performed his first complete piece, a simplified version of Für Elise that he'd practiced obsessively. The entire household gathered to listen. Dominic, Nana Rosa, the staff, even a few of Dominic's most trusted associates. Marco's performance wasn't perfect. His fingers stumbled in places, and his tempo wavered during the difficult sections. But he played with such joy, such pride in his accomplishment, that the technical flaws didn't matter. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Marco beamed, his face flushed with happiness. He looked at Aria first, seeking her approval, and she gave it with a standing ovation and tears streaming down her face. Later, after the celebration had died down and Marco was in bed, Aria found herself alone with Dominic in the music room. The space had become sacred to both of them, a place where walls came down and truth was spoken. "You've worked a miracle," Dominic said, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. 3 months ago, my son wouldn't speak. Tonight, he performed in front of a room full of people. He did the hard work. I just provided the tools. Don't diminish what you've done. Dominic's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You've given me back my son, given him a future I thought he'd lost. How do I ever repay that? You've already saved my grandmother's life. I'd say we're even. We're not even close to even. His voice dropped lower, more intimate, because somewhere along the way, you became more than Marco's music teacher, more than someone I hired to help my son. Dominic, Aria's heart was racing. This is a bad idea. Probably the worst. His lips were inches from hers now. But I stopped caring about good ideas the moment you walked into my house and changed everything. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable. Soft at first, questioning, giving Aria every opportunity to pull away. But she didn't pull away. She leaned in, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, her mouth opening under his. The kiss deepened, 3 months of denied attraction finally finding release. Dominic's arms came around her, pulling her against him with a possession that should have frightened her but instead felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aria's mind was spinning. We can't do this. Marco needs stability, not his father dating his music teacher. Marco adores you. He'd be thrilled if we were together. Until it falls apart, until your enemies use me against you, until I become a liability instead of an asset. Aria stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. I can't be another person Marco loses, Dominic. I won't survive being the reason he retreats into silence again. Dominic's expression hardened, the businessman returning. Then we keep this between us. No one needs to know until we're sure. Sure of what? That this is real. That it's worth the risk. He moved closer again, his hand finding hers. I haven't felt like this since Sophia died. Haven't wanted anyone, haven't let anyone close. But you've broken through every defense I built. Aria knew she should end this now. Walk away before the situation became more complicated. But the truth was, she'd already fallen. Had been falling since the first night when she'd seen Dominic's raw desperation to help his son. We take this slow, she said finally. So slow that no one notices until we're both sure. And if it doesn't work, it will work. Dominic's certainty was absolute, because I don't fail at things that matter. And you matter, Aria. More than you know. The secret relationship that began that night was both thrilling and terrifying. Stolen moments in the music room after Marco went to bed. Late-night phone calls when Aria couldn't sleep. Text messages that were innocent enough on the surface, but carried deeper meaning between the lines. They were careful. No public displays. No obvious changes in behavior. To everyone else, Aria was still just Marco's music teacher, and Dominic was still just her employer. But the truth hummed between them like a sustained note, beautiful, resonant, and impossible to ignore. Marco's progress continued. By mid-December, he was reading simple sheet music and picking out basic melodies by ear. He still had nightmares occasionally, but they were less frequent, less devastating. He talked about Sophia now without crying, sharing happy memories, asking questions about what she'd been like before he was born. Nana Elena was discharged from the hospital 2 days before Christmas, her recovery remarkably successful. Dr. Castellano declared her heart function better than it had been in 5 years. She returned to the apartment with strict instructions about diet and exercise, but essentially healthy. Aria expected things to return to normal, but Dominic had other plans. "Spend Christmas with us," he said one evening after Marco's lesson. "Both of you." Nana Rosa insists, and Marco's been asking every day if you're coming. "That's a family holiday. We shouldn't intrude." "Your family." Dominic pulled her into his arms, something he did frequently now that they were alone. "And I want you here. Need you here." Aria couldn't refuse. The truth was, she wanted to be there too. Wanted to see Marco open presents on Christmas morning. Wanted to be part of the warmth and joy that would fill the mansion. Christmas at the Santoro estate was magical. Marco woke everyone at dawn, practically vibrating with excitement. The tree in the great room was 12 feet tall, covered in ornaments that apparently had been Sophia's collection. Presents spilled out from beneath it in a display of excess that should have been obscene but somehow felt generous instead. Marco received everything a 7-year-old could want: toys, books, art supplies. But his favorite gift was the upright piano Dominic had installed in his bedroom, a smaller version of the grand piano in the music room. "So you can practice whenever you want," Dominic explained, ruffling his son's hair, without waiting for Aria to visit. But Marco's real excitement came when he presented Aria with a carefully wrapped package. Inside was a framed photograph, Sophia at the piano with young Marco beside her, both smiling at the camera. And next to it, a newer photo someone had taken during one of Aria's lessons, showing her at the same piano with Marco in the same position. "Nana Rosa had them framed together," Marco said shyly. "Because you're my music teacher now, just like Mama was. And I don't want to forget either of you." Aria's vision blurred with tears. She pulled Marco into a tight hug, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise." Over Marco's head, her eyes met Dominic's. He was watching them with an expression of such tender longing that Aria's heart ached. This man, this dangerous, powerful man, had been brought to his knees by love for his son and was now offering that same vulnerable love to her. Later, after Marco had finally exhausted himself and gone to bed, after Nana Rosa and Nana Elena had retired to the guest room they were sharing, Dominic pulled Aria into his private study. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small wrapped box from his desk drawer. "Dominic, I can't accept expensive gifts. Open it first, then decide." Inside was a simple silver bracelet with a single charm, a treble clef. Understated, elegant, personal. "It's not about the money," Dominic said as he fastened it around her wrist. "It's about what you represent. Music, healing, hope, everything you've brought back into our lives. It's perfect." Aria turned, her wrist, watching the charm catch the light. "Thank you. There's something else I want to give you, but I know it's too soon." Dominic cupped her face in his hands. "I want you to move in. You and your grandmother. There's an entire wing of this house sitting empty. You'd have privacy, security, and Marco would have you close by." Aria's breath caught. That's a huge step." "I know, but think about it. Your apartment building isn't safe. You're making good money now, but not enough to move somewhere better. Here, your grandmother would have access to the best medical care. You'd never worry about rent or bills or safety." His thumbs stroked her cheeks. "And selfishly, I get to see you every day. Fall asleep knowing you're under my roof, protected by my security. You're asking me to become part of your world completely. No more separation between my life and yours." "Yes." Dominic's honesty was absolute. "Because I'm done pretending this is temporary. Done acting like you're just an employee. You're mine, Aria. And I protect what's mine." The possessiveness should have sent her running. Instead, it made her feel cherished in a way she'd never experienced. "I need to talk to Nana Elena. This affects her too." "Of course. Take all the time you need. But know that the offer stands, whenever you're ready." That night, lying in the guest room with Nana Elena sleeping peacefully nearby, Aria stared at the ceiling and tried to sort through her feelings. She was falling in love with Dominic, had probably already fallen. She adored Marco like he was her own child. She'd found a family in the Santoros that filled empty spaces she hadn't realized existed. But accepting Dominic's offer meant fully embracing his world. The violence, the danger, the moral compromises. Could she live with that? Could she be the kind of woman who stood beside a mafia boss and didn't flinch from what that meant? Her phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about you in my house, in my life, in my bed. Tell me I'm not alone in this. Aria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could end this now. Pull back before she was in too deep. But the truth was, she was already drowning, and she didn't want to be saved. You're not alone, she texted back. I'm right here with you. In every way that matters. The response came immediately, then say yes. Move in. Be with me. Let me take care of you the way you've taken care of my son. Aria closed her eyes, making a decision that would change everything. Yes. We'll move in after New Year's. Give us time to adjust to the idea. You won't regret this. I swear I'll spend every day proving you made the right choice. But as Aria finally drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake a feeling of impending danger. Everything was going too well. Marco was healing. Nana Elena was healthy. She and Dominic were building something real. And in Aria's experience, happiness was always temporary. The universe had a way of balancing joy with pain, love with loss, hope with heartbreak. She just didn't know that the reckoning was already in motion, closing in on the Santoro family with deadly precision. The men who'd killed Dominic's associate had been quiet for weeks, letting him think the danger had passed. But they were simply waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And they just identified the perfect target, the young woman who'd become irreplaceable to both the mafia boss and his son. The attack came on New Year's Eve. Aria was packing her apartment, preparing for the move to the Santoro mansion. Nana Elena was resting in the bedroom. The security detail Dominic had assigned was outside in the hallway. She didn't hear the men break through the fire escape window. The first indication something was wrong came when strong hands grabbed her from behind, a cloth pressed over her mouth and nose. Chemical sweetness filled her lungs. Her vision blurred. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Nana Elena screaming her name. Aria woke to freezing cold and complete darkness. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back. Her head throbbed. Somewhere nearby, water dripped with echoing persistence. She's awake! A voice she didn't recognize. Light flooded the space. An abandoned warehouse, judging by the industrial feel. 3 men stood watching her. And tied to a chair 10 feet away was Marco, his face tear-streaked and terrified. Marco! Aria struggled against her restraints. Aria! His voice was small, broken. They took me from my bed. Said they'd kill Nana Rosa if I screamed. Touching reunion. The man who spoke was older, well-dressed, carrying himself with authority. Vincent Calabrese. Dominic Santoro's been encroaching on my territory. Time he learned the cost of ambition. Let the boy go, Aria pleaded. He's just a child. He's leverage. And so are you. Vincent smiled coldly. Dominic will come. And when he does, he'll watch everyone he loves die before I put a bullet in his head. But Vincent had made a critical mistake. He'd underestimated what a father would do to protect his son. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Dominic's men poured through like a lethal tide. Gunfire erupted. Vincent's men fell one by one, outmatched and outgunned. Dominic moved through the chaos like death incarnate, his focus laser-sharp on reaching Marco and Aria. He killed Vincent with his bare hands, the violence swift and absolute. When the smoke cleared, Dominic was cutting through Aria's restraints, then Marco's, pulling them both into his arms with a desperation that spoke of terror finally released. You're safe, he whispered against Aria's hair. You're both safe. I've got you. 3 months later, Aria stood in the music room, watching Marco perform at his first recital. The small audience of family and friends applauded as he completed a flawless rendition of Claire de Lune, his mother's song, now his own. Dominic's hand found hers, the engagement ring on her finger catching the light. Thank you, he whispered, for giving us both our voices back. Aria smiled, leaning into the man who'd become her everything. That's what family does. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.